In One Piece, strength is measured through titles. World's Strongest Swordsman, World's Strongest Man, King of Beasts. Each carries with it a story in a single phrase, an entire lifetime distilled into a legacy. Titles are used as the measure of one's mastery, and the lens through which the world understands their greatness. It is one of the easiest ways readers can observe a character's ambition, journey, and the legend they'll leave behind, just by looking at their epithet. But behind every title lies the same question. What does it truly mean to be the strongest? Is strength defined by skill, power, or fear? Mihawk's swordsmanship, Whitebeard's might, and Kaido's domination each reflect a different answer. Together, they reveal that epithets transcend mere labels, as a story of a life, a myth, and the world's memory of the man you were. To dismiss Mihawk's title as the world's strongest swordsman as mere outdated lore or decoration is to misunderstand not only his role in the story, but the narrative architecture that holds up Zoro's entire character arc. Mihawk's title is a structural pillar of One Piece's world building and of Zoro's journey itself. Undermining it would fracture the story of one of the most important Straw Hat pirates and destabilize the entire thematic integrity of Oda's narrative finesse. World's Strongest Swordsman is one of two major power titles in the verse, the other being the World's Strongest Man, both representing universally acknowledged peaks within their respective fields that define the balance of power in the world. Oda has never casually handed out absolute titles or arbitrary designations of fame. They exist solely for the purpose of acting as narrative constants and benchmarks through which ambition and legacy can be measured. A title is an earned designation. It isn't self-proclaimed nor is it symbolic. It is awarded through action and recognition alone. In combat terms, titles function like championship belts. You win the decisive fight, you inherit the title. Mihawk's title isn't ornamental. It signifies that at some point, through undeniable strength and skill, he defeated all challenges to the point where no swordsman could surpass him. That is what World's Strongest Swordsman means. To question it is to rewrite the rules of the world that Oda so brilliantly established. Zoro's emotional and narrative purpose hinges on his one goal to become the world's strongest swordsman. It is the very essence of his identity. From his very first appearance, Zoro's motivation has been to fulfill the promise he made to his childhood friend, that one day he will become the world's greatest swordsman. Now that dream only holds narrative coherence if the title itself, and the man who currently holds it, means something. Mihawk's existence in the story is the very embodiment of that promise's endpoint. He is the summit of the mountain that Zoro must climb. If Mihawk wasn't the most powerful swordsman out there, not only would he himself be a liar, but the entire framework of Zoro's character would collapse. It would mean that Zoro's lifelong ambition is built on a falsehood. He wasted 2 years of his life training under a fraud's tutelage. That would not only undermine Zoro's arc, but also contradict Oda's meticulous world building. Instead of setup and payoff, Oda has essentially delivered narrative rot and a fundamental betrayal of the story's internal logic in place of a satisfying conclusion. Do you honestly think that's at all likely? In storytelling terms, Mihawk is what Chekhov's gun represents in narrative theory, an element introduced early on that must fulfill its narrative purpose. If Mihawk's title were false or exaggerated, Oda would have revealed that contradiction. He would have planted that seed of doubt. But there is none. Every canonical portrayal of Mihawk, from his effortless domination and barbarity to his composure doing Marineford, reinforces his title. And yet some fans mistake delayed revelation for retcon. They confuse what is withheld for what is false. Not every piece of history is presented with full transparency. Look at Sengoku's recounting of the God Valley incident. The former fleet admiral portrays the battle as if Garp and Roger alone defeated the Rock's pirates, omitting the critical truths of Imu's existence, the Celestial Dragon's roles, and even the motives behind the conflict. Sengoku wasn't at God Valley, and as a Marine, his account would naturally serve institutional narrative control. This is not unique. Oda uses partial or biased perspectives like Sengoku's to build a world full of misinformation, one that mirrors how history itself is written and rewritten by those in power, something Doflamingo warned us about back in Marineford. By contrast, Mihawk's title doesn't operate as misinformation. It's not a claim filtered through bias or propaganda, it's a universally acknowledged fact within the story. The difference is critical. Sengoku's truths about God Valley are narrative smokescreens meant to mislead, while Mihawk's title is narrative bedrock. It must be true for Zoro's story to function, or for his promise to defeat Mihawk to hold any weight. We don't need to see Mihawk defeat every contender to validate that title any more than we needed to see Aokiji and Akainu's full 10-day fight to understand the stakes. Oda withholds information when it serves pacing and mystery, not just because the truth of it is in doubt. The entire art behind exposition is slowly revealing critical pieces of information as the story progresses. The reader is always on a need-to-know basis. We learned about Haki only when it became relevant to the Straw Hat's growth. We still don't know the full scope of Blackbeard's powers, or the details of the Rocky Port incident. The story is designed to drip-feed truth. Mihawk simply arrived too early in the narrative for his full scope to be unpacked. A message from Oda about how vast the mountain ahead truly was. So when people claim Mihawk's title will be overturned or recontextualized by newer characters like Nesjuro or Garling, they miss the narrative pattern. Oda delays truth when it builds suspense, not when it undermines it. Sengoku's words may one day be exposed as propaganda. Mihawk's title, however, is the truth that everything else must rise to meet. Mihawk exists in One Piece for a singular narrative function: to sit upon the throne of swordsmanship and await a challenger, someone worthy enough to unseat him. That challenger, as both men understand it, is Roronoa Zoro. Even Shanks, one of the Emperors of the Sea and a former rival of Mihawk, is positioned beneath that title. Mihawk no longer duels Shanks precisely because Shanks, having lost an arm, can no longer compete for the top. This alone demonstrates that Mihawk's title is again literal, recognized even among the most powerful pirates in the world. He is not a fraudulent title holder because the story gives no grounds for that interpretation. The only arguments against Mihawk's prestige are based on speculation and wishful reinterpretations of power scaling, blissfully ignoring textual and narrative evidence. The story itself provides zero reason to doubt its legitimacy, and instead exposes how most people fail to grasp what being a swordsman actually means in the logic of One Piece. A swordsman is not defined by just how much destruction he can unleash, but how precisely he can control it. Top-tier swordsmanship revolves around wielding incredible force with unparalleled balance, intention, and discipline. In fact, that is the first comment that Zoro makes when meeting Mihawk. It is the grace of his blade that impressed the pirate hunter most. The blade is an instrument of will. When Mihawk slices through a galleon with a casual flick of his wrist, or when he's dueling Zoro with a tiny dagger, it isn't a display of arrogance, it is the purest expression of mastery. He uses exactly the amount of force required, no more, no less. To cut only what must be cut is the philosophy of a true swordsman. For what brute hunts rabbits with a cannon? It's the same principle Zoro learns from his training, with the concept of cutting steel, but not paper, to distinguish between destruction and precision. Mihawk embodies this ideal to its logical extreme. His strength lies not in excess but in restraint. His overwhelming might is guided by perfect control. This is why Mihawk's title carries such narrative gravity. He represents the absolute refinement of swordsmanship to the point where violence and art converge. He is the swordsman who has nothing left to learn, only to test whether another can match his definition of mastery, or if he will indeed be doomed for a life of boredom. To deny Mihawk's position as the world's strongest swordsman is not just to misunderstand his character, but to misread the entire structure of Zoro's journey. The story has made it abundantly clear. Mihawk stands at the peak of swordsmanship, awaiting the man who can surpass him. Until that day arrives, he is the summit. He is the benchmark. He is the one Zoro must defeat to fulfill his promise, and to complete his narrative purpose. Mihawk's title is a cornerstone of One Piece thematic architecture, riddled with ambition, promise, and legacy. To strip that away would be to hollow out one of the series' most important character arcs. If Mihawk isn't the world's strongest swordsman, then Zoro's story does not work. Mihawk's title embodies masterful control over chaos, the perfection of craft. But what comes after mastery? What lies beyond strength? To understand that, we look to the man who transcended strength itself, the one whose power served a dream, not just a mere weapon, the Pirate King, Gol D. Roger. Roger's title was not born from either conquest nor fear, but from freedom. The Pirate King didn't rule like a conventional king. Instead, he inspired others to achieve their own dreams. His crown was the world's acknowledgement of a man who lived without restraint, whose strength served his dream rather than defined it. In him, Whitebeard saw a rival. In Kaido, an absence. Roger lived for meaning, whilst Kaido died searching for it. While Mihawk's title represents the pinnacle of skill and personal mastery, the world's strongest man carries a different kind of weight. It's not concerned with control, precision, or discipline, but unadulterated raw power, pure strength that commands respect and leaves a lasting mark on the world. That is the legacy Whitebeard bore, even as age and illness tested him. They said that he was too far past his prime, that he was too old for a war. He was an old man dying, hooked to IVs, coughing up blood, already living on borrowed time. And yet, despite everyone's doubts, he still met the impossible expectations that defined his legend. Sengoku expected the walking calamity. Crocodile expected the monster of the old era. Buggy expected the living myth, and somehow that's exactly what they got. That's what makes Marineford especially tragic. Whitebeard's body failed him, but his myth refused to die for the bonds he refused to break. Even sick, even broken, he remained Whitebeard, the man who stood at the pinnacle of power. In his prime, he was the world's most powerful man, and in his decline, he still bore the weight of that title with dignity and defiance. That's the crucial difference. Whitebeard's strength was lived with honor. His title inspired both fear and reverence. His power protected others, built families, and inspired loyalty so deep that men followed him to death without hesitation. His legend wasn't consumed by how hard he could strike or how devastating an earthquake he could make, but how deeply he was respected. Kaido, meanwhile, would inherit none of that. Kaido may have surpassed the old Whitebeard, but he never dethroned him. Because you can surpass raw strength, but you cannot surpass legacy, something that Kaido would wrestle with for the rest of his days. Kaido's myth is carved not by his own words, but by the world's fear of him. He is called the King of Beasts, the being who cannot die, the man who fell from the skies and lived. But the phrasing matters. He is the King of Beasts, not the strongest creature in title. One implies dominion over beasts, the other implies complete supremacy over all living things. Kaido's reign is over monsters. He fronts an empire of chaos, yet it remains unclear if he stands above everyone. The world calls him a creature because it has no other word for what he has become. Something beyond mortal men, beyond reason, defined only by violence and survival. Kaido is terrifying precisely because he is real. His power is not in question. His physical might eclipsed even an aged Whitebeard. His durability bordered on the divine, and in one-on-one combat few could hope to prevail. The Ace novel confirms what the manga suggests. At its peak, Kaido's raw strength surpassed old Whitebeard. And yet, for all his monstrous dominance, Kaido's legend remains riddled with contradiction. He's meant to be a paradox, the man who can't die, but also can't find meaning in living. His myth lives because of the pure terror his piracy has invoked, not just because it is fact. He is a rumor the world repeats until it believes it. That tension is what makes Kaido compelling, not a weakling. He is a man obsessed with the wrong half of strength, the part that terrifies rather than uplifts. He chases an ideal of power stripped of purpose, seeking death to prove that life meant something. But strength without meaning is hollow. Kaido's tragedy isn't that he lacked might, it's that he mistook fear for respect. His title commands dread but not reverence. Mihawk, by contrast, has never needed rumor to uphold his legend. He bears no scars, no defeats, no embellishments. His title is institutional, not speculative. His myth needs no witnesses, because the world itself acknowledges his supremacy. Kaido was obsessed with the idea of legacy, just as Whitebeard was obsessed with being a protector and a symbol for his family. But unlike Whitebeard, who measured his tale by the lives he touched and the respect he commanded, Kaido measured his through sheer indestructibility and the inevitability of death. He wanted to be remembered as a strong pirate, an unstoppable force, a being so powerful even the world itself couldn't ignore him. He drank and sought death in the most extreme of methods, seemingly out of senseless destruction. But what truly ate away at the Emperor was that he wanted to make his end meaningful, or at least undoubtable in its impact. Kaido's strength, unlike Roger's or Whitebeard's, was used without honor. He sought to dominate, terrorize, and make the world remember him, through fear rather than respect. Refusing an honorable rematch with Odin was more than a missed fight. It was a refusal to prove himself in the ways legends are remembered. Whitebeard and Roger built their legacies through strength, but motivated by choice, courage, and integrity. Kaido pursued the rawest measure of power, yet his victories rang hollow. Strength alone cannot immortalize a mortal man. Without honor, Kaido's feats were just cruelty. His power, a shadow of a legacy he could never truly claim. In the story of One Piece, he is the cautionary counterpoint, the monster who lived strong, but died without the glory that turns a life into legend. His fear of irrelevance consumed him. If he were to die quietly, if someone else surpassed him without a fight, all his strength, all his dominance would become meaningless. Unlike Whitebeard, whose legacy was cemented through respect and loyalty, Kaido chased a legacy forged by terror and domination, hoping to be remembered as the apex predator of his era. And yet, this is the tragic irony. Strength alone cannot preserve a legacy. Whitebeard, even broken and bleeding, achieved immortality in the world's memory because his power was inseparable from his humanity, his values, and the myth he lived. Kaido, in contrast, struggled to transcend mere strength. He broke families, terrorized nations, and defeated challengers, but the question that tormented him remained. Would the world remember the man, or just the monster? even surpassing strength is not enough. Legacy demands something more, and that is why Kaido's pursuit of death and his fear of it is inseparable from his pursuit of meaning beyond raw power. Titles and power mean nothing if they are not paired with integrity, respect, and the courage to face a challenge worthy of legend. When Kaido is first introduced, his reputation precedes him. The fear he inspires arrives before any demonstration of action. Unlike Mihawk or Whitebeard, Kaido's title is not formally verified. There are no recognized duels, no global acknowledgement, only mythological accounts of past deeds. He embodies the archetype of the indestructible monster, a storytelling shorthand that amplifies dread and establishes him as a narrative force of chaos. By contrast, Mihawk's World's Strongest Swordsman title is institutionally recognized. Peers, authorities, and canonical events confirm it. Whitebeard's World's Strongest Man was validated through action, legendary feats, and universal acknowledgement across the pirate world. Kaido's moniker, however, is reputation-based, rumor-driven, and inherently unverifiable. It exists in perception, not proof. It is subjective and potentially falsifiable should anyone demonstrate he can be overpowered. This distinction is crucial. Mihawk and Whitebeard function as structural pillars, benchmarks of mastery and ambition, whose titles define the hierarchy of power. Kaido, in contrast, is a narrative device, a symbol of fear and the impossible, a wall the world dreads but cannot measure. It is why Zoro leaving a scar on Kaido is narratively significant. It punctures the myth. Viewed logically, the hierarchy is clear. Mihawk's precision, skill, and haki mastery would allow him to surpass Kaido's infamous invulnerability, giving Mihawk favour in a direct confrontation. For those still skeptical, Zoro, still far from achieving his goal, managed to scar Kaido. That is no small feat. It's the culmination of years of training, Enma's unruly power, and precise haki control. But this was only Zoro reaching for his ceiling, a taste of what's to come. Now place Mihawk in that same situation. Mihawk has the world's strongest sword slash, and his craft is control perfected. He is a man who has never been injured, bears no scars, carries the most powerful blade, and has survived the Grand Line solo. He doesn't pick his fights like John Jones dodging interim champions to keep his fraudulent status. His title is up for grabs and no one has ever taken it. His mastery is absolute, honed through decades of dueling the greatest swordsman. If Zoro, an unfinished pursuit of Mihawk's ideal, could pierce Kaido's thick scales and scar him, then Mihawk would pierce the Emperor with lethal certainty. A cannon for a rabbit to a black blade for a dragon. If Ryuma's legacy as Sword God tells us anything, it's that the paper dragon loses against the black blade scissors. Mihawk, who wields the strongest of all black blades, Yoru, stands at the culmination of that lineage. Unlike emperors and revolutionaries whose political ambition, influence, and territories weigh in on their bounties, Mihawk's only metrics considered were his power and skill, yet his bounty was still enormous. His focus is singular, to find someone worthy of surpassing his level of mastery and swordsmanship. Everything else is beneath his concern. That's why Mihawk isn't present on Kaido's list of pirates that could fight him. He has no interest in conquest, domain, nor treasure, and most likely has never crossed paths with Kaido. Think of it in a similar vein to Garp. We know the hero of the Navy was on par with the legends of the Great Pirate era, yet he didn't chase the pirate throne, and didn't make an appearance on Kaido's mental list. Whitebeard in his prime remains in a separate echelon of raw, world-shattering destructive capacity, evidenced by his rivalry with Goldie Roger, whose unmatched title as Pirate King serves as the ultimate standard of legacy and strength. Kaido himself acknowledged that he was not on Roger's level, and this distinction matters. Roger is not just a measure of raw strength, but of the world's memory of a life lived at the very apex of ambition. Therefore, the most coherent deduction, consistent with both canonical feats and semi-canonical sources like the Ace novel, would go as follows. Roger and Prime Whitebeard would beat Mihawk, who would beat Shanks, who would beat Kaido, who would beat Old Whitebeard, who would beat Big Mom. This hierarchy is based off of combat ability, haki mastery, and narrative, not just rumor alone. The Ace novel's assertion that Kaido surpassed Old Whitebeard doesn't contradict the positioning either. It merely contextualizes the disparity caused by Whitebeard's age and declining health, which was a major plot point of Marineford. This scale preserves both the textual integrity and narrative logic of One Piece's world building. It situates power as a layered synthesis of strength, mastery, and legacy. Prime Whitebeard stands unchallenged at the summit of physical might, the living embodiment of a natural disaster. An earthquake man whose blows could split the heavens and whose rivalry with Roger defined an era. Mihawk follows the two legends as the apex of discipline, a warrior whose perfection of swordsmanship places him above all those who mistake power for precision. Shanks, the Child of Destiny, anchors the bridge between aggression and swordsmanship. His unmatched conqueror's haki and refined control situate him just beneath Mihawk's title, not because he's far weaker, but because of the choice he made. Once rivals whose duels shook the Grand Line, Mihawk and Shanks both stood at the peak of their art, until Shanks walked away from it. The day he lost his arm marked a deliberate redirection. He chose a dream over a title, one arm and a purpose in the boy who would become the next great era. It was a choice Mihawk could never understand, not until he ran into a certain boy in East Blue. For Mihawk, mastery is the meaning, perfection is the point. For Shanks, the sword became the means, not the end. When Mihawk refused to duel him after the loss of his arm, it was acknowledgement of that path. Shanks was no longer the man chasing the same summit. He was chasing something Roger left behind. Mihawk calls him a has-been, but there's weight behind that word. It carries the bitterness of a swordsman who lost his greatest rival to a greater dream. Shanks traded both arms of ambition for one arm of faith. Faith in freedom, in the boy named Luffy, and in the world Roger dreamed of. Mihawk stayed on the mountain, Shanks stepped off it. Both choices carry strength. One preserves the blade, the other passes it on. From that day forward, Mihawk was doomed to bide his time, waiting for a rival strong enough to truly excite him. Kaido's position reflects his monstrous endurance and overwhelming physicality, yet his self-styled title betrays a search for validation that neither Mihawk nor Whitebeard ever required. Old Whitebeard, though physically surpassed, retains mythic weight as a dying god who still met the world's impossible expectations. Big Mom concludes the scale as a brute force of nature, terrifying but unrefined, her strength lacking the philosophical or symbolic resonance of those above her. Together, this order articulates the spectrum of power in One Piece, from brute domination to absolute mastery, from the creature who cannot die to the man who cannot fall. All in all, One Piece utilizes the narrative device of titles as mirrors of meaning. They distill what drives a person, mastery, respect, or fear, into a single phrase that outlives the man himself. Mihawk's world's strongest swordsman embodies the perfection of craft, a title earned, upheld, and awaiting its rightful successor. Whitebeard's world's strongest man immortalizes the power that protected rather than destroyed, his legend enduring precisely because it was built on loyalty and love. Kaido's self-fashioned myth as the king of beasts or the so-called strongest creature exposes the fragility of a legacy built on domination alone. By striking down Odin through deceit, poisoning Wano's spirit with the smile fruit, and ruling through cruelty rather than honor, Kaido ensured that the world would remember his reign only in suffering. His pursuit of strength severed the very bonds that make strength meaningful: respect, kinship, and choice. His title demands remembrance through terror because it cannot secure it through respect. Together, these three reveal the spectrum of strength in Oda's world, from the serenity of mastery, to the nobility of legacy, to the futility of fear. Titles in One Piece aren't mere acknowledgements of power or name. They are the world's way of remembering the mark left behind by the soul, whether it's carved in reverence, remembrance, or regret. Your title is the world's memory of you, and how you choose to be remembered.